It is the Friday nightcap, and you're in luck. It's a good one. Joining me tonight, Tamara Gay, MSNBC contributor and member of the New York Times editorial board, former New York Congressman Sean Patrick Maloney, veteran political journalist Evan McMorris Santoro, and New York Times Deal Book columnist Joe Nocera. A lot happened this week, and there's a lot to cover, but I want to start with the state of Florida, the original purple state. Okay, 10 years ago, it would be unthinkable that you'd think Florida would have some of the strictest rules on abortion and the loosest rules on guns. And that all just happened in the last 2 weeks. And people keep saying, man, if Republicans keep at it, they're going to shoot themselves in the foot. But the thing is, it's the American people that are that foot. And we're the ones who could suffer from having a lot of rights taken away. So, Mara, I turn to you first. We keep saying, oh, my gosh, Republicans, like, they're going to lose in the next election if they keep doing this. But what if they don't? Ron DeSantis is really popular in Florida.
I mean, one of the things that's interesting about the Republican Party right now and concerning is they are not only focused on winning elections, but on gerrymandering and kind of anti-democratic tools to maintain power. And so what we're seeing in states like Florida is these Republican supermajorities that have kind of been the result of years of gerrymandering, actually, and other anti-democratic behavior. And so this is unfortunately not surprising, but this is not only reflective of the Republican Party becoming more extreme, but actually of a democracy problem. So we have some major threats to democracy. And I think when you think about gun control, which is something the American people overwhelmingly support, reasonable measures, and they, of course, also support a woman's right to choose, despite the Dobbs decision, that's why you see that discrepancy, right, between common public sentiment and these really extreme punishing laws that we're seeing against women in states like Florida.
Well, excuse me, I spent a lot of time in Florida over the last 3 years, and one of the things about DeSantis, the reason they like him in Florida is because he's actually competent. He is a competent governor most of the time. And so he can get away with this. He can do this without an uprising in Florida because people are still thinking, oh, you know, I could eat in a restaurant during the pandemic. Oh, we weren't locked down and we did okay. And
does it not bother Florida, the amount of deaths they had? They're just cool. That, like, when you talk to people from there, they're like, you know, we were great during COVID, and don't acknowledge that it wasn't a nirvana there.
But it wasn't a nirvana anywhere. I mean, if you adjust for age, I'm sorry to say this, if you adjust for age, California and Florida have the exact same rate of death.
But I think there's more to this because the kind of politics they're doing in Florida, it's not just that they're sort of building this out of nowhere. It's very popular, not just in Florida, but all over the country. There are a lot of conservatives who get really fired up by this stuff that's going on. I mean, DeSantis has jumped on every single culture war issue and sort of made a law about it or made an executive action about it, which could be a really sort of bad idea. It could really blow up in your face and be very embarrassing. But every time he's doing it, he's fueling that internet sort of conservatism. And it's a really effective way of doing politics right now. I don't know what it means in the long term, but I do think there's something to say about this. That Florida is a state that actually likes what they're seeing. A lot of people there do.
So explain this to me, though. So you're a parent, and you're going to equate your anger against a transgender bathroom. That's more important to you than guns in your school?
Well, the way this is all being messaged, right, is about things like parents' rights. Like, I'm a parent, I want the school to be the way I want it to be. And when it comes to guns, you know, Florida is the South. I'm from North Carolina. People often forget that Florida is also the South. This is a place where people like to have loose gun laws these days. So I'm just saying that while I understand this idea that Florida was at one time a very purple place, what I'm seeing now is sort of like the sort of purest example of what's happening in the Republican Party, what their voters want, and what kind of politics and actually wins over those voters. And that's why you're seeing it just catch fire all over the place. Republicans are in control.
Yeah, I think DeSantis is completely overrated. I'm not buying any of this. The fact is that, and I love Joe Nocera, but I don't know what competent means. The guy's already lost the presidential race. He never even got in. And the fact is, as you said, the stupidest thing any American governor or political leader has said about Ukraine and about what's actually going on there. He's built an administration based totally on wedge issues and hatred, and Trump's eating his lunch. And so he's racing to the bottom and he's losing it. And I think I think this whole thing's the biggest fairy tale I've ever seen. The growth in Florida is largely in the blue areas. It's a diverse state, and he won by a whisker originally. He got reelected, but nobody spent any money in Florida. The fact is we weren't contesting House races. We didn't have a heavily contested Senate race. And Charlie Crist, God bless him, was not the strongest candidate at the end. So I think the guy's never taken a punch, frankly, and I think that Trump is showing that you can take him apart pretty easily.
I think there are more lessons from Florida than just that. DeSantis and his legislature took on Disney, right? Like one of their biggest employers, one of their biggest sort of icons of their state.
And Iger punked him.
Well, in the end, but at the beginning, they kept that thing going right along.
Iger's going to bring him down.
Well, that's the thing I don't understand is just from an economic point of view. I mean, if you are trying to build a business, how can you recruit workers who could live in New York or elsewhere to live in Florida when the guns are everywhere, there's culture war issues? How do you get...
Here's how. You're missing one thing in Florida. Taxes. That's how.
Well, and you do it in January, the weather's pretty good.
I don't know if I even buy that, because one of the nice things about being rich, so I'm told, or being wealthy, so I'm told, is it gives you the freedom to do more of what you want.
I'm going to tell you something about rich people. They don't like to pay taxes. It's how they stay really rich. But this gets us to businesses. Where are businesses in all this, right? It wasn't that long ago in North Carolina, right, when they wanted to pass the bathroom bill. The NBA said, we're taking the All-Star game the hell out of here. Movie studios said, we can make our movies elsewhere. And businesses said, we're picking up stakes. They're cool with all this now?
DeSantis has gotten business scared. DeSantis has showed other Republican governors, other Republican politicians that that you can force business to back off. And so all of this stuff that business was doing prior to the Disney dust-up, they've stopped. It's just absolutely stopped. You don't see Apple doing it. You don't see Starbucks doing it. You don't see Microsoft doing it. The progressive companies are just not out there anymore.
Is it fair to call them progressive companies, or are those companies that are just reflective of today's workforce and today's customer base?
But what's wrong with, I mean, if you're reflective of your workers and your customer base, then what are you? Then you're something.
You're just a company trying to operate and get the best employees and get the most, and sell the most product. But is it fair to say that a company is a progressive company?
Well, you're absolutely onto something here. I think this is one of the biggest changes in politics that have happened. Because you think back to those bathroom bills in North Carolina. The NBA All-Star Game is going to go. Everybody freaks out. They change what they're going to do. Companies are not acting like that now. That pressure from customers, maybe, those things, it's not changing policy the way it was before. And you're seeing these kinds of attacks on, ESG, the Republicans are talking about, things like that, really creating a lot of traction and actually being very animating to their base. That's what I was talking about before with DeSantis and Disney. You're seeing Republicans and Republican governors take on big businesses, and they characterize it as a very populist move, right? It's a culture war move, but they characterize it as a populist move. And it seems to kind of work. And that is a big, big change in politics right now. When this abortion decision went down, we didn't see companies fleeing from these states that ban abortion. In fact, a lot of them are building factories down there and adding jobs to those places. But that's a very big change about how this stuff has worked before.
But if you make the next election in swing districts about abortion and guns, Mara's right. You're going to get your clock cleaned. And so, yeah, maybe it's good primary politics, but just this week, Florida passed a 6-week abortion ban.
He signed it in the dark of night. They sent the press release out at 11 p.m.
Because it's unpopular.
And a gun bill. And so while, sure, you can play to the cheap seats with some of the trans stuff or some of the other issues, the ones that have much more resonance are the availability of emergency contraception, are women's rights, and absolutely on gun violence, which I think is intensifying as an issue. Look, we just won a national election. In large part, by leaning into those issues. And I don't think that's going to change at all. In fact, I think it's accelerating. I would have said that if they can nominate anybody but Donald Trump, they'd have a highly competitive race. But if they're going to keep going down this road on guns and on choice, I think anybody carrying that banner is going to have trouble.
Okay, one issue or one topic, I guess, that is bipartisan, sadly, is our nation's lack of trust in our institutions. We see it every week. This week, it's the Supreme Court. These revelations about Justice Clarence Thomas, the connections he had to a mega wealthy donor. Every day, there's more things coming out. And this realization for us that the Supreme Court doesn't really have any ethics rules with any teeth. So what do we do about the fact that whether it's Congress trading stocks or the Supreme Court having little to no rules, there are all sorts of unethical but legal things? Supreme Court, what do we do about that? Because almost no one reading this Clarence Thomas stuff feels great about it.
Well, I don't think Clarence Thomas should have been there in the first place, and I think the original ethical lapse should have had something to stop him with. But look, John Roberts needs to lead on this. The justice's conduct is inexcusable. Will get you bounced out of Congress or the Senate on an ethics charge.
But if it ain't illegal, he ain't going anywhere.
Well, he did violate the law, it appears, with failing to disclose this. And it looks like a billionaire was just moving money to him. Let's be clear, just basically putting money in his pocket by buying his mom's house, by taking the taxes off his back, by doing improvements on the house. I mean, my God. And to fail to disclose it is egregious. And so John Roberts should step up. There should be a code of conduct for the justices. And I think Congress could play a role by threatening to impeach him. And by launching an investigation either in the Hill or through the Justice Department. It's unacceptable what Justice.
What do you think?
You know, I agree, but I also just think it's disturbing because every day, every month, every year that goes by without any accountability, what kind of message does that send to the American public? And just to women who are thinking about the Dobbs decision, what kind of validity does that court have for everyday Americans? I don't know. It's hard to ask Americans to continue to have trust or faith in a system that isn't fair, that isn't working. So that's a real problem.
An existential one.
An existential crisis.
Well,